Okay, guys, so this is chapter 1 of ACE International History. We're back at it again, 1.1 and 1.4 this time. So we're going to start with 1.1, so buckle up and get ready to learn. Welcome to 1.4 now. We're going back to 1.4. We're going to 1.4 now. 1.4 is all about the USA. I love that. So we're going to 1.4a. So the USA declared independence from the British Empire in 1776, and then basically they started expanding all over North America, like all the way. That's how we got California. And that's how we got Arizona. That's how we got everything west of the Mississippi, right? This was an ideology called Manifest Destiny, where the U.S. basically thought that like we are the U.S. and we're entitled to everything on this continent because God just said so. I guess like they had a vision or something. Don't ask me how they thought of this. But yeah, that's basically what the U.S. said. They were like, you know what, Manifest Destiny. We have a right to all this land and all this continent because we're just the United States and we're just the best. And like, just don't ask me. Also, in 1823, President James Monroe signed the Monroe Doctrine, which basically said like Europe out, like Europe, like you are no longer to be involved in American affairs. Like every European power that's in Europe, like if you try to intervene in America, you're gonna face the United States. And Europeans were like, I don't want to face the United States, so they just left America alone. Why he did this was because Spain was trying to actively reconquer their territories in South America, and he was like, you know what, that's not hot. So then, since it wasn't hot, he basically made like a whole like little paper. He wrote like a breakup letter with Europe. Also, skip over Civil War. Let's skip over all that. It's not an American history course. It's like ACE US if you want to hear about the Civil War and all that. But by 1890, the frontier was closed, which basically meant that there was like you know how you have the Pacific here and the Atlantic here. The U.S. had reached the Pacific. They were like, we don't know where to go. Like we're stuck. There you got everything from the Mexican-American War. They got a bunch of things from the Louisiana Purchase, the Red River Basin Purchase, the Oregon treaties, all that just like and then they were like stuck. Like, where are you gonna go? You're gonna create new land in the ocean? No, we didn't have the technology for that yet. And basically, Frederick Jackson Turner was like a political analyst guy, and he said that like the frontier is closed now. America has nowhere to expand, so now we're gonna have to imperialize. But then America was like, so we're not gonna imperialize. We're gonna be isolated. This is the first wave of American isolationism. They were like, you know what? We're gonna be our own country. We're not gonna focus on anyone else. America. You know how like when you like someone and you like a lot of people, America's people tell you like, oh, focus on yourself first, and then like go find love. That's what America was doing now. They were focusing on themselves first and then going out to find love in Africa or whatever. And then people were like low-key not that much against America imperializing. They were like, you know what? Like economically, we're going to do well. Like people were supporting it. And America was also an industrialized country, so they also needed more markets and all that. So people were low-key not against America imperializing, but like, you know, the government was like, no. No. Now onto 1.4b. We're basically going to learn about why the U.S. grew so much economically and why they were such a rival to Europe. So one thing that the U.S. had a lot of raw materials available without needing to expand. So basically, the size of Europe was like half of this glass. Like half of my glass is like this. Like this was the size of an average European country in scale. And America was this, plus this, plus this, plus this, and plus all the water in this cup. So they had more raw materials available. They had a lot of biomes. They had desert, swamp, forest, plains. America was the country. Also, Europe was doing so bad during this time and during the other parts of the 19th century that a lot of immigrants came from Europe to America. And this led to a huge rise in population and from immigration. And this also led the U.S. to grow rapidly since they had a larger workforce, and since the U.S. wasn't as densely populated as European countries, there was a lot more capital available. Also, the completion of the Transcontinental Railway in 1869 led to the connection of the West Coast and the East Coast. And like during the California Gold Rush, everything was just like the U.S. was just adding up to be a huge power. And then also, the U.S. became like a huge, like the U.S. government became involved in the industry, and they protected U.S. industry. This is where we get things like the no monopoly law and stuff like that. So like basically the U.S. was just like a very fertile ground for for business in this time. However, there was also a lot of like bad economic things happening. Like in 1893, there was this huge depression where like the value of money was going down and the people didn't have enough money to buy stuff, and that was really not good for the U.S. economy. And then the U.S. was like, you know what, we low key, like we're a good country inside, but we need to trade. We need to trade. We need to be part of the global net. And then, like, as if this wasn't enough, there was a book or like an essay published in 1890 that was called "The Influence of Sea Power Upon History." And this was kind of like basically the author, whose last name is Mahon was basically saying that like the country that controlled the sea and that controlled trade controlled like the world, and the U.S. was obsessed with controlling the world. So it was like they were like following that book in a way. So yeah, the U.S. was really looking just to grow and grow. One of the main ways that the U.S. grew was the Spanish-American War. So the Spanish-American War, it was like the first instance where the U.S. kind of like fought an imperial power, won, and imperialized. So the Cuban Rebellion obviously in Cuba, the Cubans were like rebelling against Spain, right? And then during this tumultuous period, the U.S. sent the USS Maine, like a warship, to go and rescue Americans from Cuba, ferry them back to safety in the States, and like kind of like protect their citizens. But then the USS Maine blew up in the port of Havana, and they blamed it on Spain. And like the president didn't blame it on Spain, but then the public was like, no, like we blame it on Spain, declare war on Spain. So and the government was like, we're not gonna be unpopular, so we're just gonna like go with it and declare war on Spain. This was also driven by Yellow News, which is like, it's not like a yellow newspaper. It's just like people over exaggerating things. And this just led to like a lot of confusion and misinformation. So the people were like, no, Spain is bad. Let's just not, And then the Spanish-American War, like, it led to the U.S. getting Manila. The U.S. captured Puerto Rico, Guam, and then they also captured the Manila Bay, which was in the Philippines, which is a Spanish colony. And basically this war was like super quick because like Spain could not really defend itself. So once they captured Manila Bay and Puerto Rico, Spain like retreated. They went back to the mainland to like protect actual Spain. And they signed the Treaty of Paris of 1898, so it lasted literally only 1 year. And the Spanish were like, you know what, fine, we'll give you they paid for the Philippines, like the US paid for the Philippines. They gave them Guam, the Mariana Islands, and Puerto Rico, and they gave Cuba independence. Now, President Theodore Roosevelt was a huge player during this, and basically during the war, the president was William McKinley, but then McKinley got assassinated, so he went like, and then Roosevelt was his vice president, so he stepped in, and Roosevelt added the Platt Amendment to the Cuban Constitution, which like basically said that even though Cuba was independent, the U.S. would take control of like all the operational part of Cuba, so they were like a country, like they were basically an American colony. The Panama Canal, which was basically this huge project that Roosevelt did, where he made the Panamanians revolt against the Colombians, in order to like be able to make a canal that connected the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans to facilitate sea trade through that area. Also, the expansion of the U.S. Navy. So during the Spanish-American War, the President Theodore Roosevelt was the Secretary of the Navy as well. And he basically decided that once he became president, he expanded the Navy a lot, like a huge ton. And he felt like that was the right thing to do. And then on top of this, by 1904, he added a corollary or an amendment to the Monroe Doctrine, which basically said like, hey, we're still enforcing this, by the way. Like, if you guys come back, even now, we're still gonna declare war on you. So he really expanded American power a lot through gaining territory, conducting neo-imperialist things before neo-imperialism was even a thing, creating new countries for his own convenience. Like, he really expanded American power, and he really was the first reason why America imperialized and kind of left isolationism, like the first wave of isolationism. And they would basically like make this like a guiding principle of their early 1900s foreign policy, but they wouldn't go to the extent of the Europeans, and they would really try to keep themselves removed from Europe, kind of just like becoming like the watchdog of the West and like keeping everyone under control on this side of the world. But in Europe and Asia, they would just let everyone figure it out. So they were still kind of isolated. Now moving on to 1.1D. So the reasons why the U.S. did not enter the World War I directly in 1914 is because the USA was like, this is not worth our time. Like, this is not our war. We didn't ask for this. Like, we don't want this. Like, who told you we wanted this? And then Europe was like fighting itself. So they were like, you know what? That's just not my problem. It's a European war. It's not involving me. Like, my name wasn't called on the roster, so I'm not going. However, the sinking of the Lusitania in 1915, which led to a loss of American lives, encouraged the American public to go against Germany, but not enough to declare war. However, by 1917, 2 years after the Lusitania continued, German U-boats continued attacking ships, and sometimes they were even American ships sailing in British waters. And also, the most definitive reason why the U.S. joined in 1917 was because Britain intercepted a telegram from Germany to Mexico that said, Germany was saying to Mexico, oh, Mexico, if you join the war on my side, I'll give you back all the territory you lost in the Mexican-American War. However, Britain intercepted it. However, we don't know if they actually intercepted it. We don't know if the telegram was even a real thing. Wilson was just like, you know what? This is good enough information for me. Like, they were like, you know what? We still don't know if the Zimmerman telegram is real. Okay, I'm not being a conspiracy theorist. We just don't have any proof that the telegram is real. It was, the British said it happened. The British said they intercepted it, but we don't even know if there was a telegram that they intercepted. They just told America, oh, hey, listen, Germany right there, they're not your friend. And America just believed it. And they were like, okay, that's it. We're joining the war. Like, that's the last straw. Like, they couldn't take it anymore. And President Wilson wanted the war to end quickly once he joined. It kind of worked because he joined in 1917 and it ended in 1918. So he lasted only like a few months in the war. And he had 14 points for peace. So his main points were an independent Poland, self-determination, and a League of Nations to keep peace in Europe. Those were the main 3 points of the 14 points. And then also, with the U.S. joining, the allies, like Britain's side, Britain, France, Italy, those countries, got so many more fresh troops. Like, they were able to, U.S. troops were fresh. Like, they had high morale. They were not weak. They were really strong because they had been, they weren't in war. So, this really gave, the allies a huge push. And really, the U.S. getting involved and with bringing fresh troops, being able to supply the front lines, really broke Germany. Because think about it, if it's an iguana fighting an iguana, it's kind of equal, you know? They're both kind of weak. They're both whipping each other with their tails. They're both getting lazy. Now, if a bear comes in and intercepts on the side of one iguana, the other iguana is going to lose. So basically, Germany had been fighting France and Britain and Russia, which were all super weak. They were all getting weaker, so it was just they were all kind of on an equal playing field. But then when the U.S. comes in fresh, strong, supplied, everything, it's whoa, holy frickety frick. We are fricked. It's the U.S. kind of gave the deafening blow to Germany. They were the final, the KO. And it was oh my God, this is insane. And then that's why we won the war. That's why we say that we won the war, because the U.S. entered late, but the reason why the Allies were able to decisively defeat Germany was because of the US bringing in fresh troops and being able to restore supply lines across the Atlantic. Okay, guys, anyways, thank you so much for sticking around. I hope you guys become more educated. Hope this actually helped you guys. And yeah, I hope you guys actually learned from this video. Don't forget